Hey everyone, welcome in. Betsports Golf here for our first look. The 2025 CJ Cup, Byron Nelson, TPC Craig Ranch, coming off of I don't know. This is a tough 2-week stretch, Ron, to be honest. Zurich back to back with the with Craig Ranch. We got a nice exciting stretch. I guess we're paying the tax here right now because after the Byron Nelson, we have Truist, artist formerly known as well Fargo, different course because we're not Quail Hollow because we're coming up a couple weeks out for the PGA there. We got Myrtle Beach next week too, so all field events leading up to the PGA, but then Colonial, Memorial, the Canadian Open, and the U.S. Open. So we got a nice little stretch coming up, but we're paying a little bit of tax here for the Zurich and Byron Nelson. What's going on with you, buddy?
Yeah, doing well. Yeah, I agree with you. This is an interesting time of year with, 4 signature events / majors kind of in a short period of time, which I do like. And, but yeah, I mean, last week, people have different opinions on the Zurich. I think it's just a 1-week break, something different. I know it can be a tough watch at times. But yeah, I mean, I'm real happy for Novak and Griffin. I have spent so much money on those two guys outrights over the last year, knowing how close they were, and then to see them both kind of combine together and get their first win together it was a cool thing to see. So I think personally, if as a player, I would prefer for my first win to come solo, but I think when you're a guy like Novak, who's been grinding and coming so close, you just kind of want to get that first win probably any way you can. So interesting to see, how those two guys, I know some people are even throwing out future Ryder Cup pairing here, but that's a little maybe quick for that. But I think these guys both have a lot of talent and look forward to seeing what they're doing the rest of the way.
Yeah, great to see for both those guys. It's not an accident that we get Novak, in the rabbit hole, kicking around, looking at the data, and then he finally breaks through. So shout out to Novak. Super excited for him. Same thing. Ben Griffin has been a guy that collectively, you, myself, Andy. I know Andy is almost like he's been paying the Ben Griffin tax for quite a while, just every week, just making sure he has a little bit in case, he gets over, and, good for those guys. And again, they get themselves into the PGA. They open themselves up to the remaining signature events and statuses and all that comes. So I agree with you in terms of just status of an event that you win. Not the best, but at the same time, a win's a win for them in terms of what it opens up for them in their career and, kind of how it plays out and maps out their schedule, which is super important for these guys and getting them into some of the bigger tournaments. So yeah, I mean, in the Ryder Cup, we start to have some interesting Ryder Cup conversations at this time of year, and we start to look at the back half of rosters, especially on the USA side, where it seems challenging to kind of build out 12 right now. It seems, again, we're in the States. We'll be cheering for the United States. I mean, we're still looking at like plus 150 on the Euros out there right now. And that's a tough bet to make. Is just like, someone that's cheering and wants to cheer for the U.S. to win the Ryder Cup. But man, the fact that that's still plus money on the Euros feels interesting. Again, it's pricing in the fact that no one's won an away Ryder Cup since Medina in 2012. So I don't know what to do with that, but definitely feels like the Euro side is the right side right now with the way that they're cooking for sure. So Byron Nelson gets a wrinkle this week. Scottie's in the field, Ron, which definitely adds a layer. This has not been a place where we've been getting great fields, especially since we moved to Craig Ranch. This will be the 5th iteration at Craig Ranch. Obviously, it has been you basically scoring average in the mid 20s. You got to get low. You got to make a ton of birdies. In terms of winners, we've obviously seen some down the board plays here as well. Scottie adds a wrinkle in terms of how to bet this tournament, or is this a spot where it brings in a lot more variance because the scoring is easier, right? Scottie separates when the test is harder. You can make the case, although I will still personally be entertaining the without Scottie markets, but. Give us a preview of the course. What should we expect here from TPC Craig Ranch?
You make a great point there, because there's definitely multiple ways to look at this. And if you look at the field strength, Sung JM is the only other top 35 player in this field. So you got a bunch of these Dallas area guys, Spieth, Zalatoris, Tom Kim, Siwoo Kim, who, play here every year. Few other guys, Sam Burns, the Højgaard brothers are here. Ben Griffin is playing right now. Taylor Pendrith won last year. So yeah, it's very weak at the top. You got maybe a decent second tier there. But yeah, it's for betting this week. Again, it's one where, some of those Dallas guys do interest me. And yeah, Scottie's a little bit too much even for me this week to try to get there, especially like you said, with, this is a course where, we've seen Scottie before, kind of, not really able to separate. Obviously we never want to say he can't separate, but, this obviously doesn't play to his strengths, for, looking at each of the strokes gain categories where he's the best. But again, and let me get to some changes here, because, I know most people out there probably actually have not done the research on this yet. But so since last year, so they're doing a complete renovation in the summer after the event this year. But since last year, we've got new tee boxes on 6 different holes, which have actually lengthened the course 155 yards. So this course went from the 8th longest course on tour to the 3rd longest course. So whether that added length is going to, play a role this year or not, probably with the distances we see already in the swing speeds, probably not that much. But also another pretty big switch went from 2.5-inch Bermuda rough to ryegrass rough this year. And it's 3.25 inches. So rough is longer. Obviously ryegrass is a lot easier to hit from than the Bermuda. So, even though the rough is longer, I think from my perspective and just from playing on Bermuda, how tough that is, I would even say it might be a little easier from the rough, just because, you don't have to worry about those unpredictable Bermuda lies. And also the Zoysia, had Zoysia fairways here. They also switched to ryegrass this year. So I'm not sure if that's like a preparation for the renovation or if they just wanted to try something different. But those are a few kind of relative changes to the course. But yeah, like you said, this is the, we're looking at 2.3 strokes under par, for the average round here. So, 8th easiest course on tour. We have wide fairways, 37 yards wide on average. Yeah, and it's just a course where there's not really much defense. You have Rowlett Creek, which kind of bypasses the course and crisscrosses in 14 different times, but it rarely comes into play because you really have to spray it really wide off the tee, to really get to any danger. And it's basically 200 plus on approach. How close can you get it? Can you make your putts? And so you look at kind of recent winners here. Jason Day won. Obviously, Kate Lee won twice last year. Pendrith. So again, guys who are pretty solid off the tee, who really dial in their long approaches, and then it does, one of the PGA Tours, putting contest weeks is basically what it boils down to. So for me, really, really looking into approach play from those, 200 plus. I think it's like 37% of approaches come from that range. So really looking at that this week.
Yeah, it's a lot. Good call. Good notes on the changes. We'll see how that plays itself out this week. But yeah, it's an interesting week for sure. I think going down and splashing some long shots, I think is very much in play. And you can choose to do what you want with Scottie. As he tunes up, I think there's no course on earth that isn't a good fit for Scottie. But in these instances, even though he's so far in terms of where he separates from everyone else in the field, I do think this is a spot where, because it's easier, these are all professional golfers. They're all really good, right? So when you make the test pretty easy for them, it's a little bit easier for these guys to compete with a Scottie Scheffler versus when you get them on a really trying, difficult test. You can see here, odds board up at FanDuel right now. Scheffler out at plus 280, pretty big drop off till Spieth. Again, a couple of Texas Longhorns in the field. Spieth at 18, Stunjay 22, Pendrith 25. Ben Ann, I think, was in the mix a little bit last year, 25 as well. Siwoo, Mitchell, Burns at 30. Ben Griffin coming off of obviously the first win in the field, 35. Another Texas guy, Zalatoris here at 45. Jaeger, 45. Mac Hughes, Rasmus Højgaard at 50, and then another little tier dip down. But yeah, I mean, you can make the case for some long shots here, again, based off of what we've seen here in the past. We'll look at some of the stuff that Ron's talking about here. Look at our key stats page here. At TPC Craig Ranch, you can see here par 71 stretched out. This is not updated probably with the new yardage though, Rob, but even though it still was classified as very long, as you mentioned, 8th longest, now going to play the 3rd longest this season. But this is based off of how it's played the last handful of years. You can see very easy scoring conditions, bent grass greens. We have heavy off the tee driver. And then basically everything else to see here is easy to gain off the tee. Very easy to gain on approach. The putting is obviously very easy as well. You can see all the holes, very few red holes for the most part. A lot of massive, birdie numbers here, especially these par 5s, basically a half stroke. They're playing as 4.5s. So, being able to really separate and take advantage of those is an absolute must. Like, you are definitely losing and bleeding strokes to the field if you are not getting birdies in the par 5s. And, we had a cut at 5 under last year. So that's telling you what to expect this week. You really need to take advantage. Here's the approach shot distribution that Ron's touching on here. You can see total 200 plus standard PGA Tour event, about 23%, or roughly at 36.5% last year. Over the last 5 years here, since we've been coming to Craig Ranch, 33.6% of your approach shots coming from 200 plus. So pretty significant bump compared to a standard tour event. And still, we are making birdies at a pretty elite clip. So that's one of the ones to jump out here this week. You can see off the tee, driver heavy, but not crazy. Almost 8 to 10% above tour average here. You could see, last year significantly lower. Why do you think that would have been last year in terms of just the 320 plus? Wind can be an issue in terms of course defenses, right? That'd pretty much be it.
Yeah, wind. And so last year, and it's going to be the same this year, a lot of rain leading up to the event. So not as much run on the fairways. And we're supposed to get storms on Wednesday here. So a lot of rain. So again, we're looking at very soft conditions again. And so, I know the organizers, one of their goals is even with the renovation coming up with Lanny Watkins running that, is to try to make it much firmer, which, you can do in Texas when you have the wind in play. But whenever you have, weather coming like this, where it's going to be so soft, I mean, we're just looking at a dart throwing contest on the greens again. Yeah.
And you can see here, distance from the edge of the fairway, no one's even trying. This is grip it and rip it type of data here. They're just trying to poke it out there and get themselves as close as possible. We'll see how that changes maybe with the rough. But in terms of, you see here, scoring, which again is going to matter significantly this week. You see scoring average significantly, 2 shots below a tour average event. Birdie or better rate, upwards of 4.5% above average, whether that's from the rough or from the fairway. You could see birdie rates from the rough. It doesn't matter. We've had some pretty massive spikes over tour average here over the last couple of years since we've been coming to Craig Ranch. So, birdies and bunches, putting. Let's see if there's anything specific that jumps out. Putting, 3-putt avoidance is very, just you're not 3-putting here. You 1-putt's a little bit higher than tour average. So nothing crazy, but again, just bombing it out there. Soft greens, and you can see the scores here. You see last year Pendrith a little bit lower, or I guess he and Jason Day at 23 compared to years past. But you see sometimes you'll see this, you'll win at 23, but then the rest of the field is in like the teens, or someone just kind of separated. But here we have 7 guys at 20 or under, and a bunch of guys that were kind of in the mix. You get probably the same thing here if we go back to 23. With Jason Day, same thing. Look at this. You got 7 guys at 20 under. Scheffler, one of those guys here, very much in the mix. So interesting to see the Hattons of the world. It feels like a lifetime ago when these guys are in the field. But yeah, not a daunting test ahead of it for these guys this week. So any other course, fields, odds, notes before you want to kind of kick around some stats here?
No, yeah, let's dig into the I think this is an interesting week to look at some of the filters, and for me it's it's going to be kind of pounding the very easy and trying to, like we always do, try to recreate those conditions they're gonna face this week.
Great way to start. I think, easy, very easy, long, very long. You can blend those, see what kind of sample size you get. In terms of, like Ron said, modeling, trying to really recreate the conditions that are here. If you're looking at like recent form and you want to see how players have played as of late, if you were taking a look at a sample of the last 20 rounds, for instance, well, that's for a lot of these guys, or some of these guys, that's going to include Augusta National. It's a little different, whereas Ben Griffin's sample doesn't include that, right? He's playing in a different set of circumstances. So this allows you to get a better grasp of who's played well under easy, very easy conditions. So you can see last 2 years, Scheffler only has 16 rounds played in the last 2 years on easy and very easy golf courses. Let's see what those are. Probably a couple of years ago when he came here would be one of them. American Express, Century, Scottish Open, and then here at the Byron Nelson, right? So whereas you see, Mac Hughes, for instance, 54 rounds, you can see Eckroat, Hostler, this is where these guys make their hay. Ben Griffin, 82 round sample compared to just 16 for Scottie, which is, I think, pretty interesting to see. But Sanjay, Ben Griffin, Eric Cole, Sam Burns, Austin Eckroat are your top 5 here in the easy, very easy scoring conditions. You can mess around with the sample there too. And then you can look at long, very long. I would probably want to look at long, very long with some sort of other condition, whether it's weak field strength or easier scoring conditions, because again, this is a spot where Scheffler's probably gonna have a decent sample. These are on difficult golf course tests where that's not really going to be the same as the sample. So let's see what we get here. If we keep the very easy on, and we look at long, very long. I just want to see last 2 years if we're getting kind of a 30-ish, 40-ish round sample for some of these guys, because I think it matters, right? Nope, smaller sample. We need to back out a little bit. See if we get the last 3 years, make it a little bit more playable. This is where it can get challenging.
Yeah, and I think an interesting one too is to go easy scoring, weak field, because it's like a birdie fest, kind of like your what's the tournament in Cali? That's it's the names escaping me at the moment. The John Rahm putting American Express, yeah. So very similar to that. So I think you can also, combining those, especially when like a guy like Zalatoris, never plays well in those types of events. So
never.
Interesting to see what he would rank in that mix here.
Well, Will Zalatoris, 11th actually, small sample comparatively, but I agree with you. This is not the spot for Zalatoris. Eric Cole tops here, and again, we kept the easy, very easy scoring condition on. Field strength weak and very weak. Eric Cole, Ben Griffin, Sanjay, Scottie, Taylor Pendrith are your top 5. Again, Scottie's sample significantly smaller than everyone else.
See what the average is. If we let's see how far some of these guys drop, like compared to the top.
Scheffler and Burns kind of separate there. Again, smaller sample for those two. Sanjay, another guy at 2.31 strokes, so a little bit of a drop. Surprisingly, here's Al, 1.84 strokes. Short game struggles there. Spieth, another real small sample of just 10 rounds for those guys. And then you get into the Eric Cole, Ben Griffin, Mac Hughes of the world with a larger sample, which I think is a little bit more useful there. You can see Tom Kim, Highsmith, Chan Kim, who would be significantly better if we can make a putt. Seamus Power, Pendrith, again, your defending champ. So yeah, this is, I think, a better way to kind of capture it. You're going to have these Scheffler, Burns, Spieth outliers in terms of the sample for them, but it's the closest we can get. And I think it's better tell for those guys that are a little bit further down.
Yeah, and just really quick, if you notice, the ranking is a little different than the strokes gained total ranking, and that's just so people are clear. That's because when it built this, you kind of give a little more emphasis to guys who have played more rounds, and so it's basically a formula where the more rounds you play, so like an Eric Cole, like 58 rounds, it's a ton of rounds, and so the sample size is a little higher, so it's kind of a different ranking when you kind of view it through that lens of adding in that sample size.
Yeah, it's a good call. You look in the total for just raw, which is not super helpful when you have kind of a mixed match of conditions here, because that's not really telling us anything. Percentage of rounds gained, I always find to be really useful because you get an understanding of floor performance, a little bit more of ceiling, how frequently guys are getting it done. You could see the ball striking is what was carrying Zalatoris there, which makes a lot of sense. Same thing for for Scottie, which is typically the case. Whereas Burns is getting a lot of heavy lifting done with the short game. His ball striking is not getting it done. This is an easy ball striking event too, right? It's another way that you can kind of filter that out here. And you get some smaller sample guys. Again, some of the rookies on tour or Euros coming over. You could filter that out here too if you want the minimum round feature.
I click on Zalatoris' rounds. That's surprising to me because you have this perception of him, and then you come and look at the data, and then it's different than what I expected. So I'd like to, and that's the cool thing here is you can click in and see these what he's actually done recently.
So the Amex played well. Rocket Mortgage, great opening rounds, and then couldn't get it done. Missed the cut there in round 2. The Amex again, so he's played well. Yeah, the Amex is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. Is basically what it is, and then mixed bag at Rocket Mortgage. So you can see here. I think I had an outright bet on this version. We go Texas. Didn't have the full form thoughts of Zalatoris on harder tests yet. We knew that, but it wasn't excluding him on easier ones. But I still, it's flying in the face of it. Now we're bouncing back a little bit still. But yeah, I'm definitely surprised to see it as performing as well. But it's mostly Amex. I mean, this is 8.5 strokes. We'd love to see how that's kind of broken out. But the Amex does that to us. Some pretty easy courses, and we only have shot link data on one of the 3. So interesting. All right. What else should we look at here? So those are our easy conditions, weak fields, easy ball striking.
Yeah, easy ball. So another thing that's interesting, just with it being such a driver heavy course, and I know I don't know if we've looked at long fields yet, but combining long and very long with driver heavy, I know that's just guys who are comfortable getting it out there, and whether you want to look at this off the tee or just total or even ball striking, I think is a decent way to look at when you combine these 2 together as well.
Yeah, I agree. I like ball striking typically through this. Just really want to get a sense of how they're setting themselves up for second shots as well. Let's see here, the last 3 years. We'll see what this looks like. Might dial it in a little bit tighter. Yes, we're getting a pretty good sample for. Again, this might be another spot where Scheffler, because harder golf courses are often also longer golf courses, not always. He might have a bigger sample than guys here comparatively. So, you're seeing that a little bit here round wise. So long and very long golf courses, driver heavy. Scheffler at the top by a full stroke. Isaiah Salinda, very small sample, playing on very different golf courses than Scottie Scheffler. 1.3. Semi Valimaki consistently shows up at long golf courses. We've seen that in Mexico and a few other Valimaki stops for sure. 30-round sample, not bad. Chan Kim. Putting is in this sample, strangely, which is not tying. We're not looking at putting really at all. He's putted well on these longer golf courses. Keith Mitchell, get those first round leader bets in. He just seems to love Thursday golf this year. Jaeger, big sample, has played well. Pendrith, Brian Campbell, makes no sense to me, and the sample is really small. That'll come back to earth. I would be willing to bet on. Here's Gim, Im, and Ben Griffin again. So let's look at the ball striking specifically and see who's really been able to take advantage of that setup. Not surprised. Here's a Gary Woodland popping. Doug Gim there as well. Smalley. That all makes sense. We didn't see them in the strokes gained total because you see the big bright red numbers putting wise. Johnny Vegas would also check that box. There's Salinda again. Nikolai Højgaard, Kevin Yu. Kevin Yu's interesting. Ball striking numbers. Kevin Yu were really good. The guy cannot make a putt. Kitayama, Rosner. Here's Keith Mitchell again. So decent sample. Again, courses they're playing on are going to look very different for some of these guys, but this is a pretty good metric to look at this week because, again, grip it and rip it off the tee. You got to get it out there, especially if it's going to play even longer to Ron's new notes. All right, what else should we look at here? That was long, very long golf courses. Let's look at long, very long Let's see. I'm going to keep this on. I'm going to keep same metrics off the tee, driver heavy, long and very long golf courses, but I'm going to put in easy, very easy to gain on approach, and easy, very easy to gain off the tee. And see what kind of sample we get here for these guys, because we're going to look at ball striking through this lens. So easy ball striking test on long golf courses where driver usage is heavy. Yeah, so we're overfitting a little bit. So this is what again, mixed samples, decent sample for some guys, and just too small of a sample for others. But let's pull out the minimum rounds. I just wanted to see if this, this is the trial and error, right? Sometimes this is you're overfitting, you got too many things on, you're getting yourself into, too much of a. You're basically looking at the course history at the course you're looking at. So it's kind of what we are here. I think probably Scottie, Jeremy Paul, Keith Mitchell, Chan Kim, Steven Yeager. For the rest of these guys, you're getting into like it's not nothing sample wise for these guys at 20 to 30 rounds. But yeah,
well, no, I was gonna say take off driver heavy and see what that does, because I think that will still capture the easiness of ball striking along with longer courses. And again, a lot of these guys just, which also makes sense, is it's such a weak field event that you're going to have a lot of guys with very little sample. A lot of these Corn Ferry guys from last year, pretty much all of them are playing in this event too. For sure, right? And definitely Scottie, but even some of the other guys, their samples so small. So yeah, that helps a little bit. Gets a little bit of a bigger sample, kind of in that 24 to 30 range, which is nice to see. And again, Scheffler, really showing out here a little bit. So. Guys that have not performed well, I put a minimum 8 round. Let's see if we get anyone that's a little bit bigger. Buckley, Harry Higgs, Lipsky, Davis Riley. Surprising. He's playing really good golf. Since the Colonial win, it was pretty terrible for a solid 20 starts. And he's turned the corner a little bit here. Lashley. So I like to look at the bottom here just to see who's. We can cross any names out. So kind of too small of a sample to do that, in my opinion. All right, what else do you want to look at? Let's look at let's clear those out, and let's look at strokes gained Texas, because I think we have every single state in the rabbit hole, but obviously it doesn't make sense to look at a lot of them individually. But I think Texas, is very unique. With players who grew up here, used to playing here, the wind conditions. Are kind of unique in Texas, how they kind of pop up out of nowhere, having lived there for a long time. It's crazy how it can be calm. And then, 30 minutes later, it's blowing at 20 miles an hour. So I think it's a very unique place to play golf. And so, there is kind of a narrative out there that, a lot of the Texas guys do play well here. I know Ryan Palmer, for one, who's kind of getting up there in age, but he's a guy who's always, rock solid here.
Yeah, good call. Yeah. Scottie and Jordan, you'd expect. Kind of the class of the fields and Texas guys as well. Matt Hughes, Steven Yeager, Matt Kuchar, Davis Riley, Gary Woodland, Alejandro Tosti, Ben An, and Keith Mitchell are your top 10. Texas, that's total last 3 years. And decent sample, kind of in that round where we wanted. We look at average, let's see where the data separates, if there's any big teardrops. Pretty big teardrops. Scottie Scheffler is good at golf. Hughes, Spieth, Cooch, Yeager, Woodland, Tosti, Ben-An, Davis Riley, Valimaki. Again, small sample, but again, not nothing. There's Mitchell again, Burns, Siwoo. So, yeah, I think some of the names you probably were expecting, guys that call Texas home or have come here pretty consistently. I think these are some good names. Definitely some names I'm swimming around in the betting market here early on a Monday morning. So good confirmation bias. Pulled forward my model from last year and just trying to tinker around with it to see if it matches up at all. So I have not finalized that, but this is helpful.
Yeah, I think another key one, obviously we got to get some scoring in here. So I think par 5, I think that's going to be key this week, but just in general, I think birdie or better. And then looking at easy scoring courses, birdie or better, again, trying to recreate those conditions. I think it's a week where you can kind of get a little more in depth as far as the, long course, weak field, easy scoring. Once you get to the actual metrics, I think it's a pretty much, you want to score, you want to score on the par fives, and definitely I think after this, maybe take a look at approach play from 200 plus for sure.
Yeah, a lot of that for sure. All right, so this is easy, very easy scoring conditions. Look at the last 3 years, birdie or better rate. And yeah, that's a good sample. Scottie, 32%, Sanjay, Burns, Benan, and Spieth are your top 5. And again, kind of, your elite-ish class in this field in terms of field strength.
And this is just really quick. This is a perfect course for those next two guys. And they were just both partners last week, Svensson and Norgard, both just bombers off the tee who also, they're not great on approach except for longer irons are good. And again, both of them, especially Svensson, can just light it up on the greens. And so he's a real guy to look at this week.
Yep. Svensson and Norgard. Yeah, I like them last week, but the more I thought about them as a long shot, I'm like, it's not the course for those guys. But I like it's a fun team. Just because just strategically, especially for, best ball, just send it, right? Just get one guy to send it and just, get yourself an opportunity to see if you can separate that way. But yeah, Siwoo right behind him, significantly bigger sample. Cam Davis, Eric Cole, those guys have been playing a lot of tracks that kind of check out here. And then, see a lot of guys too with distance here. So, Ventura can get it out there. Salinas can get it out there. Castillo, Menacero. Okay. Yeah. So decent. These guys are making birdies on easy scoring conditions here. And then you said you wanted to look at longer approach. Oh, let's just look at par fives too while we're here. Just look at, make sure that this kind of aligns or see if anyone else adds. So we'll keep these conditions on easy scoring conditions. But let's look at the par five scoring and see if we can get any data here.
And these are a few of the holes that were lengthened this year, so I would expect them to play slightly tougher. But again, there's only 3 of these on the course, so I'm not going to weigh par 5 scoring as much as I generally would, just because the par 4s are so easy. But sure. I think you definitely need to take advantage of these. And even something like looking at eagle rates on these holes is always interesting too.
Yeah, and you mentioned par 71, so we just have the 3 of them. There's Spieth, Benan, Siwoo, Sanjay, Pendrith, Scottie, Burns, and then here are your, the 2 guys you mentioned with Norgard and Svensson right there in their par 5 birdie or better rates. Kevin Yu, another guy that can poke it out there. Tom Kim. So as you said, par 4s are so easy here as well. So I'm gonna take a look at that. Let's reset and take a look at 200 plus, as we saw here, and you look into course stats page, overall shot distribution, pretty significant at 200 plus. I would say 36% or so over the last couple of years. So total, last year was 36.5% of your approach shots are coming from 200 plus. So absolute must to have that part of your game dialed in this week. So we'll look here, overall approach proximity. And again, we have fairway and rough. With what we've seen here, with the willingness to just send it off the tee and not really worry. I wouldn't get too in the weeds and breaking it down from a fairway or rough standpoint. I think overall is probably the best way to go about it. Let's see, we'll look at the last 12 months, break it down. And again, you can look at this through different filtering, as we said. If you want to look at easier scoring conditions or greens and reg rate being easy, those things I'll check out this week here as well. So overall 200 plus is what I want to see. Harrison Endicott, good for you. Small sample. Bramlett, another guy can send it out there. Trace Crow, Kitayama, Chandler Phillips, Keith Mitchell. Here's Ekro, Valimaki, as we touched on earlier. Norms Young and Chad Ramey. Thor can get it out there at a pretty big sample. Schmidt, Grayson Sig. Again, part of this is the test from 200 plus is tougher for a lot of guys. But again, you just tying it in, weighing it in the model, getting the look, because it's mattered quite a bit. Anything specifically here you want to look at or tie into?
No, not going to be, obviously the rough with it being a little longer this year, but I'm still not looking at that much with, with the wider fairway. So I think just in general, I think these are just good looks just to get kind of a baseline on where guys are and how they perform on some of these courses.
Who's our guy here with no name? Mystery golfer. Mystery golfer. Yep. Such a mystery. I'll have to dig into the back end of that guy. 10 rounds, it's something. He's been bad though, so don't feel bad not highlighting him. You don't have to worry about him. We're not burying the lead. Whoever that gentleman is, someone we don't need to consider this week. So, yeah, you can see the average here if you want to see if there's any tier drops, but yeah, same list. So that's all I got.
I think one last interesting thing, because this is, spike putting. So, our floor ceiling filter, I think this is a great week to, whenever there's a birdie contest week, it's just kind of saying, okay, who has shown in the past that, they can spike on these greens, and these are, bent greens this week. And you could look at it with bent greens, without bent greens. I think there's, as we know, guys have different opinions on whether, the green surfaces really matter to them as well. So, but just to kind of get an idea of, may not be the best putter, but they've shown they can pop on certain weeks.
Yeah. And again, I put the very easy scoring condition filter on too. We can look at it that way. Looking at, let's kind of get some of the small sample stuff out. Last 12 months, very easy scoring conditions. Because some of these guys are definitely not going to have enough, but guys that do, I'm going to look at gaining 2 or more strokes putting. You see Sam Burns, Matt Hughes, Kiz. Good for you. Here's Texas native Ryan Palmer, Molinari, Harry Hall, Sanjay. These guys basically a quarter of the time are gaining 2 strokes putting in these conditions, which I think is pretty interesting. Get back out a little bit. There's Palmer again. Still Ryan Palmer week. He's getting small sample, but he, rolling it well here. Let's go back. We'll pull this off and we'll add bent and see if there's anything to the bent specifically. To Ron's point. And again, I think you should probably look at it without bent and then also with bent to get a sample. Just, who could show up and putt when these scoring is demanded. We'll look at 2 again just to keep it consistent. Pearson Cootie, Vincent Whaley, Matty Schmidt, Taylor Moore, Marty Laird, Kisner. Those guys are all at least a quarter on bent. Sanjay not far behind. There's Burns again. Salatoris, basically when he gains, he's gaining 2 strokes. So that's pretty good. Let's see anyone got an actual ceiling? 3 or more. Similar names. Taylor Moore, Matt Hughes. Okay. Get some more confirmation bias there.
And here's another thing, and we don't have to do this because it would take some time, but with the ability to favorite players where you can star them, is what I like to do is I like to go these weeks and look at, okay, who are the best ball strikers in this field who are bad putters? So like a Gary Woodland type. So I would star Woodland. And then I would take that handful of players, come back to this page and see, okay, so which of these players who I know are good ball strikers, they're going to be there every week, which of those handful of guys have shown some spike putting ability. So that's just another way to get creative and kind of the ability the rabbit hole allows you to look at just a subset of players and kind of compare that way. So I think that's just another great way to kind of do little kind of mini breakdowns this week.
Yeah, it's a great call because you don't have to, you don't have to model everything, right? You can mess around with it a little bit. We have to get this looked at too because I'm clicking on approach. It's telling me ball striking. I click on ball striking. It's telling me approach.
Oh yeah, making notes right now.
Yeah. So you see here, ball striking in the last, again, there's no filters on them. Just look at the last 12 months to Ron's point. If you want to see some guys that, really are consistently separating ball striking wise and see where they pop in the putting. This is what he's talking about. You can click these stars here, favorite them, and then see where they show up. Search by favorites only. Right up here is an option for you too if you had all those favorites, and then you can see how they look into some of the other metrics, right? It doesn't have to just be used to model, put it all in there and weigh it off. It doesn't have to be. You can definitely use all of the features here of the rabbit hole without even using the modeling part of the tool. So don't be intimidated by it. All right, buddy. Anything else for us? I think that's it.
Yeah, we covered it.
Again, head over to the site. We'll have Ron's preview here up for you to take a look at. Again, if you want to take advantage of the rabbit hole, get this offer from our friends over at BetMGM. Deposit and play. $10 on bet MGM. Throw $10 on a bet this week. Right after that bet is closed out, you're going to get an email within 48 hours on how to take advantage and access BetSports Golf for a calendar year, no additional charge. Super easy. Any questions, reach out to us specifically. They will pay you back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So you can take advantage of it that way. If you just happen to be in a state and you haven't taken advantage of MGM yet, maybe you already have. And maybe your significant other hasn't. And they need to bet on Scottie Scheffler this week for, a couple bucks. They're not going to use the BetSports Golf subscription. Take advantage. Say, hey, you're going to get an email. Let me know what that code is. I'll take advantage of this free BetSports Golf sub for a year since you're not going to use it. So if you have any questions, let us know. There's another deal from our friends over at Drafters on the site as well. If you happen to be in a non-legal betting state or a non-MGM state, to get a free 90-day sub. Same details. Links are in here. Promo code BSG. You start betting or start using Drafters for NFL best ball leagues. They are firing off a $2.5 million best ball championship. If you want to, grind football drafts now that the draft is behind us, take advantage of that. Again, reach out if you have any specific questions. So appreciate you hanging out with us. Subscribe here, BetSports Golf on the YouTube channel before you take off. BetSports Golf where you listen to podcasts. Be back on Tuesday with Andy Molitor to talk our bets. See if we have any live bets. We got a live event this week as well. So again, subscribe before you take off.